Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Sean Campbell, who's the founder of Cascade Insights. Sean, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Hey, you're welcome. So give us a little bit of background on your entrepreneurial journey and then what led you to found your firm, Cascade Insights.
Yeah, happy to. I mean, the first thing is I had no intentions of becoming a business owner. I was going to become a college professor. My wife and I have this thing where she says, I would follow you to Waterloo. And no fault of Waterloo, Iowa. What she means is that I was considering doing a PhD program in communications, and it was going to be in Waterloo, Iowa, where there was a good program. And I had finished my master's degree, love teaching, still do, and I'll get to how that ties in owning a business at some point if we want to. But basically, I decided not to. I decided I didn't want to be a starving college professor as much as I was inspired by the idea. And ended up doing a lot of technical training of software programs, applications, etc., and then eventually ended up breaking out and becoming an independent trainer, basically getting paid on contract to do week-long teaching gigs. And that was the start of the entrepreneurial journey. And then that led me to build a company with two other guys who were also independent trainers. And by the time we grew and sold that, we were at about like $2.5 million in revenue and about 20 plus employees. And then I started Cascade in 2007. And that had a little slower start. If anybody knows the kind of calendar of the economy, 2008 comes right after 2007. So things were a little slower then. So anyway, so we only started adding employees to Cascade back in about like 2010, 2011-ish. And we're somewhere between 25 and 30 now. We're growing pretty fast, which is why sometimes I actually say words like we're somewhere between, because I have to kind of count all the time. And it's been really nice. I mean, we've had kind of been on a nice run with Cascade, but I didn't plan to do any of this. Like I had a completely different idea, and I kind of know why I ended up here. I mean, at least I know that. Like, it's not like a complete befuddlement, but yeah, that's how I ended up owning businesses for 20 years.
Yeah. And, having a teaching background and interest, I feel completely ties into the entrepreneurial journey, as well as running a company, because in business, in marketing and sales, it's not all about telling and selling. It's about teaching and educating and being that educator and advocate for your cause, your target audience. So that really ties into the buyer's journey. And I know that's one thing you focus on. So talk a little bit about the buyer's journey and how you determine for a company what their prospect's buyer's journey is, and then how to capitalize on that.
Yeah. Well, and one thing there too, just on the teaching, I think teaching is one of the best skills to have if you are an entrepreneur, because of one simple reason: you are supposed to be constantly giving away what you do. That's fundamental to the entrepreneurial journey, right? Like, and to some people, that's almost an anathema. Like, they think, my goal is to hoard people and money and assets, and I'm supposed to be the smartest person in the building always. And frankly, if you look inside those companies, they're pretty toxic. And I have always felt like the best thing I can do is teach the people who report to me. And that doesn't mean I know everything. That means sometimes I have to kind of learn alongside them, right? And figure out what's the next thing to do. But my goal is to figure that out every day. What can I give away? And how can I teach and mentor people to do, frankly, that job way better than I can? I mean, partly because they're more focused on it, and partly because hopefully I've picked somebody who's got maybe even more passion for that thing than I do, right? Because most entrepreneurs, when they start out, they kind of are good at doing a bunch of hats. But at the end of the day, you've got to figure out that thing that really is uniquely yours that you have to own. And I think in well-performing companies, you see that duality. Like the people feel really, really empowered. And at the same time, it's super clear what the owner actually brings to the company. And that, I think being able to teach and apprentice people is super important to that. So, but to answer the question you brought up, I mean, there's a few things I could touch on there. That when you talk about specifically how we go about it, you know, we're a market research firm, and we also do a lot of marketing campaign activities for our clients. Like the canonical customer for us is a B2B marketer in a B2B technology company. That's our sweet spot. And so, you know, they will have lots of questions about the buyer's journey. You know, and we will have to analyze that qualitatively and quantitatively for them. You know, one of the more important things that companies get wrong, I'd say there's probably two things in the buyer's journey, though, of any stripe, but I know more of it from a B2B context than anything else. They're not narrow enough, they themselves, and they also tend to target the wrong person almost always for their marketing efforts. And I'll take the latter one first. Okay. Sales and marketing, when they sit in a room and say, who's the most important person to target, have always kind of the same myopia that sets in. It's the last person they talk to in the sales chain. So they end up focusing marketing efforts on the CIO or the vice president of whatever or the director of whatever. And the funny thing is, with a digital buyer's journey, it's never that person that's actually searching for vendors, suppliers, and products and solutions. It's not that person. It's somebody fairly junior. So what you really should do with your website is you should target that person. And this feels so weird to people because they're like, well, wait a minute, we're not talking about C-levels and directors and all the people that matter. I'm like, yeah, but they don't come to your website. Frankly, if you asked most C-level buyers, have they ever visited the vendor websites of all the vendors that their company uses? There'd be like a zero there.
So in other
words,
they'd be
like, I have people that go do that.
Company.
Right, like, exactly.
Yeah, who's doing the preliminary research to shortlist the top vendors to then get up to the VPs and the whoever, and then at that point in the buyer's journey, now you need different, you know, white papers or whatever to engage that person.
Right. Or frankly, at that point, you need a killer sales team, right? Because that's, you know, because most sales cycles at that point transition more to a sales-driven model. But let's say it doesn't, and you're a SaaS company and you don't really have salespeople. You're one of those, like, we just have customer success managers, which are also salespeople, but that's for a different podcast. But anyway, you know, in that model where maybe marketing holds the water for much longer on the buyer's journey, in that scenario, yes, then you need different collateral. Maybe you need a different portion of your site. But it's just strange because it always happens. You know, we'll go to some site and we'll be like, who are you targeting? They're like, oh, CIOs. And we're like, do CIOs come to the site? And you can watch it. Like the first reaction is, of course. Well, we don't know.
Yeah.
Well, let's go figure that out. Let's go talk to CIOs. And they'll say, well, no, I send John or Sam or Mary to go figure this out. Who's John, Sam, or Mary? Oh, a manager. And the thing is, it can be super powerful because basically the marketing then changes from, hey, big cheese, you should buy us, to, hey, let me empower you. Let me help you have good conversations. Let me show you how this is actually going to help you 3 layers down in the org chart and why you should bother to go tell anybody else about this. And frankly, there's been a lot of viral product successes that have followed this model, you know, Slack, Tableau, to mention ones that are in our lane. That started from the bottom and then kind of grew up, right? And that's kind of a really good example of that. The second thing I brought up, though, was, or rather the first, because we're doing this backwards, I guess, is the what I've called like the age of narrow. And I started calling it this because I needed some phrase for it. And because I felt like I was on to something, but, you know, everything needs a handle to grab, right? And I don't mean narrow thinking by this, because I think that's the first thing people think of. Like, great, I've heard enough of that. And I've heard enough of that. I don't mean narrow thinking. But here's the thing that's happening, and I think every sales cycle and every marketing cycle that gets ignored. Buyers don't trust your content.
Yeah.
That's step A. And step B, in their personal lives, the content they consume is narrower and narrower. Now, we could on a different show talk about how that's a negative influence on society or politics or whatever. But again, that's not the point. The point is, though, that it's happening. And it's happening in everything. Like I've started to fall in love with a lot of like foreign language shows that are subtitled, because I can go log into like, you know, a site in Germany and watch a bunch of German shows on German television that are subtitled in English, right? I mean, you can get really narrow in what you stream these days, like exceedingly narrow. Forget about your Netflix queue. You can just watch Russian sci-fi all day long if that's what you wanted, right? And Russian sci-fi is pretty hilarious, by the way. I'm a big sci-fi guy. but it's anyway. That's a different thing. But it's kind of a cool genre. So people are living these very narrow things. They also don't trust content. So they go up to your site, and all your site screams is, "We do everything." And people just walk away, because here's what they're looking for. They're looking for you to say what you don't do. And when you don't say it yourself, they either make up whatever answer they feel like making up for that, which may not be anything close to what you want them to think you don't do, because clearly there are things you don't do, right? I mean, and one little touchstone on this. When I bring this up to people, they'll go, yeah, of course there's things we don't do. And I say, okay, so what personas are you not going to target in your messaging? And it takes them 20 minutes to come up with one, because they don't want to. Yeah. Or I'll say, well, what customer segments do you not want to sell to? And it'll take them 30 minutes to come up with one, because they don't want to. But you know there's things you don't serve. There just are, right? I mean, you know, Red Robin doesn't serve sushi. It's a burger chain out here, and I live in Portland. They don't serve sushi. There's things they don't do. And so what you have to do is put that on the website. And here's what happens. People automatically love you more, because it's the same dynamic in another area we see. Like when you go to Amazon and go look for a product, you sort by negative reviews, because you don't always believe the positive ones, right? If you review like 5 in a row that are 5 stars, you flip that thing over and you say, okay, what are the 1 stars? Maybe those are more real, right? And so by just laying that out there and being super crisp about what you don't do, and if folks go to our site, like CascadeInsights.com, it's all over it. And we hear it all the time. They're like, you made it so easy for me. I knew you guys did what you did. And here's the kicker. Your sales team has to follow through on that. Your sales team can't like keep making the aperture wider and try to force the company to do more and more. And particularly leadership has to follow through on that. Like when revenue gets tight, you can't all of a sudden pretend you're a brain surgeon and start operating on people. You can't. You just can't. And I would say that's probably one of the hardest things to do in services. Like product, it's hard to not go into a new market or not address a new audience. But hey, your product has some boundaries, right? A car is a car. It's not a plane, right? So there's some limits inherently to whatever physical good you offer. But for anything that's digital, software, or things like services that are very fungible, it's super easy to be like, oh, we could help those people. Sure. We have smart people here. Dumbest thing in the world to do. Because at some point, if you took 2 trajectories, and then I'll stop on this, and we can go wherever you want to go, but like, if you took 2 companies starting at year 1, and one of them was really good at staying narrow, and slowly and incrementally adding things to what they do. And another company started out with like, we have smart people, we're going to own the world, we can do anything. Here's where you end up 10 years later. The first company actually has lower cost of customer acquisition, they have higher customer loyalty, they make more profit, they have more sustainability in their pipe, they have less churn when it comes to like lost customers, a million things like that. All sounds like a good company to have. The second company is constantly going crazy trying to find the next block of revenue. They don't have a lot of loyalty because their customers don't really know what they do well. They have problems developing products because they're trying to develop it for like 3,000 different customer segments all at the same time. And they're probably fighting a commodity battle because everybody else has a point solution that does better than they do on some area. And the only way you can win that is if like you become like the platform. But if you look out at the world, there's only so many platforms. There's only so many things that like everything else runs on. So I'm not negative on platforms. I mean, we work with Microsoft, we work with AWS, we work with Salesforce. All those guys have platforms that are used by the world. But those are fairly limited number of successes compared to all the other companies that aren't ever going to get to be like the world's foremost platform or the default that everybody uses. And for everybody else, you're much better to be narrow because you got all these social issues, these societal issues, this kind of wet wiring that people are using in their daily lives, and they're applying it to every purchase they make, including yours.
100%. You know, that you trying to unpack what you mentioned there. It will take us about 4 or 5 hours. So I mean, you just really laid out a lot of great content. So here's a question that I'd like to wrap up with for a company that thinks, because I think that. And I'll qualify the word thinks that we're just doing just fine, you know, because you look at your website for market research and we can find the buyer's journey. We can find and we can create and, you know, help you discover what are some triggers or flags in the organization that one of the decision makers could notice to go, you know, we could potentially be benefited by some really in-depth market research to take our organization or our sales or our marketing to the next level. What are some things to watch out for where they would then think, let's engage Cascade?
Yeah, well, there's a few things. So I'll keep it as brief as I can. I mean, and these aren't necessarily ordered in terms of like most important to least, but you know, do sales and marketing have a very different view of the buyer persona that matters? That would be a red flag. You need to go research that and figure that out. Another thing would be, do you sense that your buyer persona that you target has shifted? Like, you know, in the technical landscape, the IT director used to rule supreme for decades. Line of business buyers rule supreme now. And the IT director is basically kind of in a subservient mode to those folks. So the who cares in the buying, who matters most in the buying chain might change. Another thing would be that, you know, and this is one of my favorite, and I wish it wasn't my favorite because it's kind of sad. I'll talk to marketers and I'll say, how many meaningful leads does your website generate? And it's really funny. The very first answer is, well, some. And I say, okay, but really how much? And then the next thing is, well, we've got great uplift on our website and we get lots of traffic. And it's almost like they don't answer the question. And finally, I'll get them to say, how many leads do you actually convert? And the answers always stun me. They're anywhere from we don't know to, well, sales doesn't tell us, or only a few, or sometimes the answer is none. You might have a marketing team of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people, and the website's not doing anything. And so I would say as an executive, that's one of the questions to kind of probe on, because I'll sum it up as this. On sales has its own set of issues in life, but sales has a very simple metric that everybody has to focus on. Did you generate revenue? Like, you can have all the excuses in the world, but at the end of the day, did you generate revenue? Marketers, for I won't even say for better or worse, for worse, have invented 1,001 metrics to claim success when they're not generating leads. It's insane, really. Like my own marketing team, we don't fly that way. Like, yes, we look at all kinds of metrics. Are people looking at our content? Are they engaging? All the things you can, I mean, 1,000,001 things we could talk about, right? But it all rolls up to one thing. Are we generating meaningful leads? And I would say that would be a huge tripwire in your buyer's journey. If you ask your marketing team over and over again, are we generating quality leads? And they spit out 7 other statistics, it's time to do some homework. And it doesn't mean the marketers are bad people, by the way, to be clear. It's just that they have the marketing industry, let's say, has trained itself to invent additional statistics that prove success, even when the only statistic that matters, are you helping the company generating revenue, is failing.
Yeah, I like to call those vanity metrics.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, and some of them are vanity metrics, but some of them are actually pragmatic, but they're not. Don't apply. They don't really. Yeah, it's the strangest thing, right? It's like launching a rocket and saying, Well, it blew up and it's in 1,000 pieces, but we had great telemetry, right? You know what I mean? And it's kind of like, well, no, the rocket blew up. I mean, we have to at least deal with that. So I would say any of those things are big things to pay attention to. And if those things show up as flags, then it's a great time to think about buyer's journey research or market segmentation research or anything along those lines.
Excellent. Well, Sean, thank you for coming on today. It was really insightful. Leave us with what's the best place that listeners can reach out and connect with you and learn more.
Well, if you just go to cascadeinsights.com, I'm on some of the About Us pages there along with the rest of the team. And folks could also reach out to me at my email, Sean, SEAN, at cascadeinsights.com. And, I made clear the lane we're in. So if you're in that lane, if you're in a B2B tech company, we'd love to talk to you. If you're not, well, we're probably not going to be a good fit for you. But what I would say is that I'm always happy to help other entrepreneurs on their journey. So you can always reach out to me and drop me a note and say, hey, I'm struggling with this, or I'm curious about this, or what you said kind of really rang true to me. I'm always happy to just be a mentor and coach to folks, even if it's not directly related to what Cascade does. I just want to pay it forward as much as I can.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Sean. I really appreciate you coming on today, and it was a pleasure learning from your entrepreneurial journey.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.